Trending here in Canada today is the federal budget. It was tabled by the Liberals in the House of Commons yesterday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is accusing the Conservatives of siding with multi-millionaires and standing against fairness after the Tories said they won't support the federal budget. In it, the Liberals included a promise to make corporations and rich individuals pay more tax on capital gains. Manisa Danabalan joins us live with more reaction today. Hey, Manisa.
Hey, Nicole. A number of economists say this budget targets the cost of living, which is important for many Canadians right now. Trudeau told members of the Liberal caucus that it's all about creating fairness for every generation, especially millennials and Gen Z. Unsurprisingly, many critics and political rivals are not impressed with the $535 billion budget. But some economists say it'll make an incremental difference for Canadians struggling with the cost of living. It includes $8.5 billion to help build millions of homes and another $2.6 billion for student aid and grant programs.
The housing initiatives, I think, are very important and in many ways, I think, very creative. They're going to free up currently federally owned land for housing construction projects. That's useful. They're even going to convert some unused federal office buildings into apartments. I think that's a very creative and promising idea. I think this is a step in the right direction, and most Canadians will get some benefit from one or more of those various programs.
Housing is definitely the focus this year.
There are certainly areas that received less attention. The environment file, for instance, that was actually a big focus in last year's federal budget, received very little attention in this year's budget, in part because a lot of that focus went to housing. And so in terms of healthcare, certainly the healthcare accords that were negotiated last year was a big focus of the federal government, but this was not a healthcare budget either. That was, I think the federal government considers that, something that was dealt with in previous budgets.
But there were other gaps that not everyone is happy with. The Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak says the federal budget all but ignores the needs of Indigenous communities and does nothing to close the First Nations infrastructure gap by 2030.
Last week, the Assembly of First Nations and the federal government co-released a report identifying the infrastructure gap among First Nations to be over $350 billion.
Elsewhere, there's $11.5 billion in new spending this year and $53 billion over the next 5 years. But despite the new aid programs like a national school food program, there was no noticeable change in the federal deficit, which is projected at $39.8 billion, something that is a concern for Conservatives.
We have a lot of discussion in Canada about whether our deficit is too big, but when you look internationally, Canada's deficit is one of the smallest relative to our economy of any industrial country. Just look across the border at our friends in America. Their deficit literally is 10 times bigger than ours as a share of GDP, not in dollars. Yet their economy is doing much better than ours.
One item in the budget that's still standing out today in the trends is changes to Canada's capital gains tax.
The new change on the capital gains inclusion rate was quite a surprise. There had been hints of taxation changes, and this is a big one. Certainly very well targeted towards higher income earners and corporations. And so I think it's an important measure in terms of attempting to pay for some of the big programs.
The first phase of national pharmacare and federal standards for long-term care will also be funded, two commitments the Liberals made to the NDP as start of their supply and confidence deal. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and the Bloc Québécois have openly stated that they'll vote against the budget. Now all eyes are on the NDP and whether they will support the Liberals on their spending plan. If they don't, the budget could fail and trigger an election. Nicole?
Well, Manisa, it's a good thing the NDP leader is here with us to answer those questions. Joining us now from Ottawa is Mr. Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, first things first, do you support this Liberal budget?
Well, this is a decision that we're not making yet. I've identified some really good things that we fought for that are in the budget, despite the Conservatives' best effort to stop it. We got pharmacare, which is going to cover free diabetes and medical devices, free birth control. We got protection for renters, which was really important. And we were able to get a school lunch program to give kids a nutritious meal in school, saving the families money and pressure of having to afford food for their kids at lunch. This is going to be really helpful to people, lower the cost. But there are concerns I have, and I want to raise those concerns directly with the Prime Minister and hear what their plan is before we give our decision on the budget.
So what's happening behind the scenes right now? When will the meeting with the Liberals be, and what are you specifically looking for in this budget?
So yes, I'll be looking for a meeting with the Prime Minister, and I'll be raising a number of things. First off, we fought very hard for a disability benefit, but that amount of $200 a month is far too low given how bad the cost of living is right now. That $200 a month is not going to cover enough to help people with the costs of what they're going through. That's one. The 5,000 workers being cut from the public service, I want to know if that's going to impact services. I want to know what the impacts are of that cut. So I want to understand what the plan is from the government. And there's a big gap between the infrastructure and housing needs of Indigenous communities and what's being offered. That's something that I want to see the plan for and understand before we give our decision. And also, the budget was released yesterday. We've looked it over. Our team has discussed it, but we want to be very thorough in making sure we're getting everything we can for Canadians and getting them the help that they need before we make our decision.
It is a large document to go through, but Mr. Singh, will you continue to prop up the Liberal government if changes aren't made to this budget that you're calling for?
Well, what we are doing first is just really making that assessment. Is this helping people? Are these the things that we force the government to do? Are they all being reflected there? And is there a plan to address the concerns that we're raising? So we're not negotiating publicly right now. We are just raising concerns. I'll be meeting with the Prime Minister directly to raise those concerns. And our team is working to make sure that everything that we need to see to give people that relief that they need is in the budget.
No one likes to give ultimatums, but you do have a lot of power here. If Trudeau doesn't meet the calls of the NDP, would you insist on an election?
Well, the agreement that we've laid out, that we fought for, puts forward a number of things that this government has to do. And so, some of those things are reflected. We want to make sure that it is done in the right way. We wanted to see free medication for diabetes patients, including medical devices. So far, it looks positive. We want to make sure that that's all covered off. The rental protection, this is something we demanded had to be in this budget. It's there. We want to make sure that that plan is strong and protects renters from getting rent evicted. I know in Hamilton, rent evictions and dem evictions are a real concern. Lots of people have lost their homes because of it. We want to keep people safe in their homes, safe in their apartments, and not under constant threat of being kicked out. And we also want to make sure that school lunch program actually is there in a concrete way to give food to kids in school to make sure that they get a nutritious meal. So these are things that we fought for and we're proud of. This is going to lower costs for people. But we want to make sure that everything is done appropriately. And so we know the power that we hold. We have forced the government to do these things, and we know that this budget will not pass unless we support it. So we're going to take that all very seriously.
Mr. Singh, thank you for joining us tonight on Trending Now.
Thank you very much.